In this video, I'm going to show you how we use funding frameworks and funding sequences to predictably and sustainably get access to business capital for our clients. Now, I first want to start out with funding frameworks, which is what you see here. Now, a lot of people tend to misconstrue funding frameworks with funding sequences like they're the same, but they're absolutely not. A funding framework is how you structure your funding round for any given moment. But here's the thing, it's going to differ on the type of business that you have and the data that you have here in front of you. This is why you have to be really careful if you see someone talking about something on YouTube with a bank, a financial institution, or a funding round that they went through. You're leaving out the most important piece to the entire thing working, and that is your business. I don't know about you, but I want to have everything dialed in, which is why whenever we're taking on a client, I'm always looking at first how we're going to structure it based on where their business is coming in at, because no two businesses are identical, because funding is not a one size fits all. Because I know that, we always start out at the top with the entity. So if you're doing this from the comfort of your own home, the first thing that you want to look at is the entity that you're looking to get funding for. It could be an LLC, it could be an S Corp, it can be a C Corp. Could it be a sole proprietorship? Sure. Just know that at scale, that's not the best way to operate your business, especially from a liability standpoint, but also if you're looking to scale the capital that you get access to. So the first thing that I always want to look at when I'm setting up a funding round for a client is the entity structure. Second thing that we're looking at is the location. Now, this can be where the business domiciles, meaning the home of the business establishment. So it's obviously going to be here in the United States, but what I mean by that is, where is it in the country? Is it in Delaware? Is it in Wyoming? Is it in New York? Is it in California? This is the domestic. This is the domestic entity, meaning where it domiciles, where it's established. But then you also have a foreign setup. I'll give you an example of when a foreign setup is typically used is if you have a business for tax or legal reasons, and you maybe set it up through Wyoming, but you actually operate the business inside of another state. So let's say that you operate that business inside of Mississippi or inside of Texas. You would set up what's known as a foreign entity so that you can continue to conduct business inside of said state. This changes the entire equation, though, of the funding framework and how we actually approach funding, because now you're not necessarily operating out of one state. You now have multiple states that you can operate out of. Now, there's pros and cons to operating out of multiple states, especially when you're looking to scale your capital, which I won't get into in this video, but just know that depending on which one this is that carries the majority of the weight of the structure, that's what we're going to put the majority of our emphasis on. We have our revenue, which is pretty self-explanatory. Now, this could be projected revenue, meaning what you plan on your business making, or it can be true revenue, meaning what you've actually reported on your taxes. This right here can make or break your business getting access to something as small as a 50K line all the way upwards of a 500K business product line. Assets, if you're maybe collateralizing some loans, I'll give you an example. There was a bank that we were working with, and one of our clients said, if their unsecured product, meaning I don't have to use any collateral, goes up to $100,001, this means that anything above $100,002, they would have to collateralize something. This could be a piece of real estate. This could be a property. This could be a vehicle. They would go ahead, run their, what they call the value or the estimated value of that for what it is in market. And then they would run it into their algorithm. And then they would determine, okay, based on where you're at with your asset, this is how much we can extend out to you. That's known as a secured product. This is something that I would want to know, because if I'm in a place in my business and I have a couple of properties that I've already dialed in using the example of real estate, I may want to flex on them a little bit. And I may want to use some collateral if it means 10xing the amount of capital that I'm going to get access to, all things being equal. Now, there's a couple of things that goes into this, but like if that's going to be the big difference for me to be able to secure a piece of real estate that I've been eyeing for some time, why wouldn't I flex that muscle? This is something that you would want to know. This is something that I want to know whenever we're taking on clients, because it's going to 100% change how we structure their funding setups. Cash flow and liquidity, I have them here as one and one the same. The reason I have them here as one and one the same, even though they're not, or at least in the same section, I should say, is because cash flow is the money that's coming in through the business. And then the liquidity is how much money I'm parking into said bank account. And so I could have a business that's cash flowing, let's say $10,000 a month, but the liquidity that I'm running into, let's say that bank could be a $2,000 deposit that I just put, and then maybe a $4,000 deposit into another bank or another credit union that I'm looking to strengthen that relationship with, because that's also going to change the order of products that we use to get access to capital, and also could change the dynamic of the bank that we work with. Time in business, pretty self-explanatory. I will say this though, I would steer clear of just depending on time in business to be or to come solely from a shelf corp or an aged entity, because of everything else that I'm dialing in with you right here. I can't tell you how many times somebody comes in and they're freaking like, it kills me inside a little bit, if I'm honest with you. Hey, Irv, I have this LLC that I bought from, so and so down the street. They charged me a couple grand for it, but it has 5 years attached to it. Yes, but it, like, all this right here is jacked up. And guess what? It doesn't actually come with the revenue. And so even if you have an aged LLC and it's like 7 years old that you bought from someone, and I don't want you to get scammed, which is why I'm giving you this data, it doesn't negate the fact that you can't skip this when you're going through your funding. And so all that to say, in most instances, if we can't help a client dial it in, or if I just flat out turn someone down, like, hey, I can't help you, I'm not going to work with you, then what ends up happening is we have to start from scratch anyways. And so you flushed money down the toilet. Keep that in mind. Industry, which is the line of work that you're in. And then lastly, the profile of the business owner, meaning your credit profile, because there is something to be said about the strength of a business owner's credit profile, especially if it's going to lower their perceived risk to the banks and financial institutions, meaning they're then able to get access to more capital. And then the business as a whole, if you're already playing at that level. You may not have any business credit established just yet. At that point, you're going to have to flex that personal profile as the business owner and make sure that you're not seen as the liability. So you can't have these crazy utilizations over 80%. You can't have 15 collections on there. You can't have 25 hard inquiries. This right here has to be spotless. Now let's move into what the funding sequence looks like so that we can start bringing all this together. All right, so the funding sequence is the timeline of how you're going to move through each of the funding frameworks. Here's what I mean by that. If, let's say, I have Bank A, Bank B, and Bank C, and each of those banks is its own business credit line, that is the framework, because I know exactly where I'm going based on my business, based on my revenue, based on my projections, based on where I'm located in the country. Everything that we just finished breaking down into what goes into a funding framework. But this is going to be the timeline, meaning, am I going to go through it within 15 days? Am I going to go through the sequence in the next 30 days? Is it going to be a 60-day? Is it going to be 90 days? Is it going to be one round of funding? Is it going to be 2 rounds of funding? If so, what's that timeline? Before I give you what a real world example looks like, which is what you see here, starting from 0, going all the way through 250K, I first want to spend like 35 seconds on in-house versus third-party underwriting, because I think it's freaking crucial. In-house means that you are going to apply at said bank, and they're going to have their own underwriting criteria. So an example of this would be a whale, like a Chase, or Wells Fargo, a Bank of America. Those are the big boys. Those are the big dogs. They're going to have their own in-house criteria as to what they look for, their own algorithms. And so they're just going to go ahead and determine in-house yay or nay on the capital that you're looking to get access to, and if they want to partner or not with your business based off of where your business is and how it's established. Third-party underwriting, though, is a third-party company that's underwriting on behalf of banks and credit unions. This is where a lot of people screw it up. And I see it all the time, which is what we have to help our clients reverse engineer and then put an actual funding setup into place, which is, let's say you go to Bank A, Bank B, and Bank C, and you don't realize that all of them are being underwritten by the same third-party company. A common one that you see out there is Elon Financial. Another one is TCM. HTLF has another big network. FNBO. Those are all networks that work alongside big, or I should say mid-sized banks and mostly credit unions. And that data is important to know because you could think, oh, I'm going to like 3 or 4 different banks and I'm just going to apply for a credit line here. I'm going to apply for a credit line there. And it's landing inside of the same spot. So then they see, wait a minute, why are you applying for so much credit so quickly? We've already given you, let's say 30K over here. Why do you need another 40K here? Or you've already been denied over here. Yeah, we already had that data on the business. Let's deny them again over here. And so I see this happen a lot, especially when I have entrepreneurs that come to us and they say, man, I've thrown like everything at this. And then it's just one quick fix for us. And it's because they've been essentially fishing inside of the same pond. And so we help them reverse engineer by doing what I'm about to show you right now. So let's say you have a baby LLC, whether you've gotten it funded before or you haven't, or if it's something that you're just like a brand new project that we're working on. Let's say that we're starting at zero. I'm going to walk you through what this process will look like. We apply and we set up our funding framework, and we're in this first piece of the sequence. So let's say that this piece right here takes about 30 days, give or take. Let me make sure that's nice and clear for us. 30 days, give or take, to go from 0 to 75K. Don't like come for me in the comments saying, is that fast? Is that slow? It's going to depend on each business and where you're at. I'm just giving you a linear example so we can move through this linearly. That's a lot of L's. 30 days from go from 0 to 75K, right? So this means that we used a funding framework based on where the business was. We put it through a funding sequence. The timeline in this case was 30 days. And on the back end of it, we got 75K. You got typically one of two things happens here, folks. Either we stop here, or what most people tend to do is, why stop there, especially when you're deploying capital? Let's keep things going. Okay, cool. So then you deploy either the second half of the first funding round, because remember, you can't just shotgun a ton of applications. You got to cool it. You got to let the system breathe. You can't look too desperate. You also can't take too long. And so there's a sweet science to this. And again, it's going to vary by business, location, the whole 9 yards. And so you can either deploy the second half of the first funding framework, which is what we do with our clients, or we redesign a new funding round, or a funding setup for this next funding round. So let's say this is also another 30 days. So if you're doing the math, you would think that we are at 30 days plus 30 days puts you at 60. I would venture to say that that's a little too quick. You probably want to space it out a little bit just based on what we're seeing and where the economy is as a whole. So you're probably closer to about 90 days, give or take, just to be safe, because you do want to have that cool down period, especially if you're not in a crazy rush and you're deploying the capital. You're going to have that cool down period anyways. So you're probably sitting closer to about 75, maybe 90 days. Now, as we move into this last piece right here, can you get access to 250K worth of business credit with one funding round? Absolutely. I've seen it. Can you do it with multiple? Absolutely. Can you do it with one product? Absolutely. It's all going to depend off of a couple things. The type of capital that you're looking to get access to. Let me define that for you. Can I actually make my business work with just business credit cards? If the answer is no, then that means that credit stacking alone, 0% business credit cards, is out the gate. So this means that as we're setting up our funding sequence, the timeline, we have to consider in our thinking caps, can I include in there a business line of credit? The answer is going to be yes. I would want to consider a business line of credit, because if I can do more of the front loading with a big 75K line out the gate, I've saved my hard increase. I've saved a ton of what I'm just going to call it what it is, a ton of crazy applications that just start to run you through the mill, especially when you start to try to credit stack like a mad person. And then lastly, you're able to kind of breeze through this process a lot faster. You don't need that cooling period because you haven't, what I call, wasted as many attempts or as many bullets. Now, again, is this going to be case by case? Absolutely. Is this going to mean that you're going to come in, watch this video, and go from 0 to 250K? Absolutely not. I know nothing about your situation, your business, or how jacked up your profile is, right? And I say that lovingly, but take a look at what needs to be done in your business. Go back to the first half of that video, or of this video, I should say, and take a look at, okay, based on the funding framework, where am I? How many of these data points do I actually know, and do I have set up? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to link another video, probably right in here, that lets you know if you have a virtual office address and it's not set up correctly, it could be one of the breaking points that's keeping you from getting access to business credit like you should be. Check it out right here.